Did any of you see the broadcast on ABC of the Pope? Everybody saw that? Oh my goodness. They put him on a huge jumbotron. It was Skype, so that he could talk to the people in the churches. There were 3 of them, one in Los Angeles, one in McAllen, Texas, and one in New York. And they selected a couple of people who had a question they wanted to ask the Pope, so there was interaction. And I think I blubbered through the whole thing, but his answers, the love that comes from that man is just absolutely amazing. It doesn't matter to me whether he's Catholic or what he is. He is a high being that simply knows that love of God and who can just exude it to whoever talks to him. For those of you who know my name and that I sing, I just thought I'd tell you that I've been a minister for 30 years, that I had 3 churches over 27 years, one here in Columbia, Missouri, one in San Jose, California, and one in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm here to stay. I thought, okay, God, if you want me to move, you're going to do the packing because I'm not going anywhere. No. But this morning, I want to talk to you about something that is printed on our prayer vigil chapel and everywhere in Unity or Silent Unity. Be still and know. Be still and know that I am God. And you know, most of us think we know what that means. And so I had to have some experiences to discover what that really means. And I started out in Colombia, I was taking Jesus seriously when he said, do the things that I do. And along the river there are a lot of caves. It's a favorite spelunking place. And I was fortunate that no one was out there that day crawling around in those caves, because I walked up to the cave and I said, Lazarus, come forth. Okay. And so I said it again, Lazarus, come forth. And I kept saying this, and suddenly I started to realize that I was calling forth the Lazarus in me who was asleep and needed to be called forth into my experience. And I thought, oh, that's kind of neat, Thank heaven nobody came walking out of that cave, or I don't know what I would have done. And when I was in Corpus Christi, Texas at conference, we were out on the Intercoastal Waterway, and there was this huge, long jetty out into the Gulf of Mexico. And in the evening, I decided to walk out there, and it looks like about 0.2 of a mile or so. It's a long one. And I got way out to the end, looking at the Gulf of Mexico all around me, and I said, peace be still, peace be still. And the next thing I know, I was sitting in a heap on the walkway. And I thought, you know what, Carol? Before you ask that much power to come through you, you probably need to expand your consciousness a little more. And so I thought, okay. And when I turned around and looked, it was getting dark, and all I could see was this ribbon of concrete going back to the shore. And the black waves were hitting higher and higher on this jetty. And I looked around, I thought, you know what? I got a whole lot more respect now for Peter, because he stepped out on that. And there was no way I was going to step out there. But there were just so many beginning lessons for me in that. I started to follow Jesus in a different way after that. But this morning I want to talk to you about the Syrophoenician woman. She was Canaanite, but she lived between Sidon and Tyre, which is now Lebanon. And she had a daughter who had some malady that was going to take her life. And her home was up there between Tyre and Sidon, and that week Jesus had decided to go up into that area where no one knew him, so that he could just have some rest and fat chance Fat chance. They knew where he was, and somehow this woman knew as well. And she knew she needed to get to Jesus to heal her daughter. So I want you to go with me to her house somewhere up there. And she's getting up before dawn. And she's lighting one of those oil lamps. And she walks into the other room to look at her daughter. And yes, her daughter was still breathing. And she left a servant to sit beside her daughter's bed. Well, she picked up a cloth and she put into it figs and cheese and bread and took some water with her and tucked it into her robe. And just before dawn, she started out down the stony path from her house down to the road. And the sun was coming up and she knew she had to hurry. And so for a few hours, she was walking on this road, hoping that he would still be there when she got there. And you can just imagine that tension that was in her, that she had to hurry. She had to keep moving. And so she got to the place where she knew he would be, and she came over this little rise of a hill, thinking he would be alone. And there in this little valley were about 5,000 people. And how was she ever going to get to Jesus? And so she started through the crowd. Some of them wanted to throw stones at her because she was a foreigner and considered unclean, and some of them wanted to block her way. The disciples saw her coming and they kept shooing her away. And this was going on all afternoon, and she just got hysterical. Just hysterical, and started screaming and calling out and carrying on. And if you can imagine, Jesus had his disciples there, and they were doing triage. The people who wanted healing, they were lining them up so that the crowd wouldn't just mob him. And they were very busy with all of these people. And they turned their attention away for a minute, and she broke through. She broke through, she got to Jesus, she said, "You've got to heal my daughter." She was screaming, she was hysterical. And Jesus, you can imagine, he was working with these people one by one. And who's this? And he said, "Woman, I'm here, I've got all these people in front of me." And she said, "I know, Lord, I know. You came to heal the children of Israel, but my daughter is deathly ill, and she needs you. She needs to be healed." And, you know, it says that he called her a dog. Not quite. He said, "I can't just throw all of this to the dogs. I can't just shoo these people away." And she said, "I know, Lord, but even the dogs are willing to eat the crumbs under the table of the children of Israel." And she stopped. Just stopped. She was not going to get what she wanted. He was going to reject her, and she was a foreigner, so why wouldn't he reject her? He was a Jew, and he was there for the Jewish people. And she just stopped. And he said, "Woman, go home. Your daughter's been healed." Now, what on earth happened? What on earth happened? We cannot storm the gates of heaven. We cannot follow our spiritual path, crying, screaming, emotional, upset about things in the world. And she had just stopped. Well, when my kids were really young, they were about 9 and 11, and I was a screamer. I yelled at my kids all the time. I yelled at them for everything. I yelled at them for nothing. And one day, I suddenly just saw this image of myself. Is this what I want for my life? Is this who I want to be? And I stopped. And I told my kids, "I'm not yelling at you, I'm yelling at me. You have never done anything wrong in your whole life, and you never will." And you know how kids are. "Oh, okay," and they went back to doing what they were doing. But from that time on, I was free to start pursuing a spiritual path. I could never have done it in the state of mind I was in, that constant anger and hollering and frustration doesn't work. I stopped. To this day, occasionally I'll say to my kids, they're not kids, they're 52 and 54 actually, but I say to them, I was not happy at the way I treated you when you were little kids. And they said, Mom, you showed us that you could change. Right in front of us, you changed, and you taught us that we can change too. Here, all these years later, they still remember that. So there was, not only was her daughter healed, my sons were healed as well, and they never forgot it. Well, it took lots of practice over the years to release that habit of just launching into frustration. The world encourages us to be frustrated and unhappy, and if you're not unhappy about something, you must not know what's going on. So if you go around being happy all the time, they're going to look at you like, maybe there's something wrong with your brain or something like that. But this world is not accustomed to happiness and joy and peace. And so all around us, you turn on the television. Now they advertise every kind of drug you can possibly think of to fix whatever you think is wrong. And most of those drugs, we well know, are poison. They poison the body. They may fix something over here, and they start 6 things over here. And they're showing you this wonderful picture of people on a picnic or rowing a boat or something, while they list at least 20 terrible things that can happen to you when you take this drug. And if you have a side effect or death, call your doctor. It's absolutely ridiculous what we've gotten to. Well, it took me a lot of practice to begin to just screen out that stuff and remember who I am as a spiritual being and start to walk that path. Well, my second church was in San Jose, California. And the campus consisted of 2 old Spanish mansions and a freestanding sanctuary that had been built with cutting all the corners. It was an attractive place, but when you really looked closely, you could see that the paneling on the wall was painted plywood, and a lot of these things, and they had never upgraded these old mansions. So there were cracks in the foundation, all sorts of things. And we got to the place where we needed to sell it. Because I got to that church after they had had a huge, huge church fight. And the congregation went from 250 to 99 by the time I got there. And a lot of the people had left, of course, and those who were the tithers had left. And so even without having a mortgage to pay on this place, we could not support the ministry. And we were losing about $3,000 a month. And there had been money from the sale of some property that we used to fill in. And finally, in the 3rd year, I said to the people in my board, we have 14 months to live. This is all we've got. And so we decided that we were going to have to sell the place. And we sold the place as is because there was no way we could repair anything. We had no money. And we sold it to a Roy Eugene Davis church. And Roy Eugene Davis was another metaphysical teacher. And so the people who were coming in there were of the same consciousness. And so we planned to have this huge celebration on Sunday morning where both congregations would come together and both ministers in the pulpit, and we had a ceremony where we'd pass the keys to the church to the new owners. And we had a big party planned at a hotel after that. And on Thursday afternoon, I was sitting in my office, which was in one of those Spanish mansions where the bookstore was, prayer room, and so forth. And half of the power went out. How could only half of the power go out? And so I called the city. And they came in, and after a while they come into my office and they said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And he took me around and parted the bushes to where the service box was. And he said, "This service box has not been updated since 1926. And he said, the reason you only have half of the power is that there are 2 cables going out to the poles, and the rats have chewed through one of them, and we're well on their way to disconnecting the other one." And I said, "Can you fix this?" Well, he said, "Just a minute." And he had a cordless phone, and he called somebody in the city, and they told him that all of the service boxes in the city had been turned over to the city many long years ago, and for some reason, this box had never been turned over to the city. I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "It means that we cannot touch this until you get 3 estimates from private contractors. They will probably cost you $1,000 each if you can get anybody to even do it." So I calmly explained to him that we had sold the place as is, that we had this big celebration coming on Sunday, and I needed things to work. And he said, "Okay." He said, "Well," and he walked away. And I stood there and I said, "Okay, God, I am going to stand here until you fix this. I am just going to stand here quietly. I'm not going to worry about anything. I'm not going to think about anything. You fix this." And I must have stood there for 10 minutes. And the man came back and he said, "We'll fix it in the morning. We'll fix it in the morning." I didn't ask any questions. I just said, "Thank you. Thank you, God." And they came in the next morning and they fixed this. Now, if I had been upset, "Oh my God, what are we going to do? We don't have the money to do this, and we got this thing coming up," and I could have been crazy in my former state of consciousness. But I stopped. Like the Syrophoenician woman, like me yelling at my kids, I stopped. You know, it says in Exodus 14:14, "You have only to stand still, and God will fight your battles for you." And then later on in Psalms it says, "Be still and know that I am God." And we're going to be called to be still in the midst of incredible turmoil, incredible blockages to where we're going. Everything looks totally impossible, and we want to go, "Oh my God," and scream bloody murder, and we're called to be still. Hard thing to do. Like I said, it took me some years of practice to learn that when everything looked blocked, stop. Stop. And of course, over the years now, I've learned not to get that upset about things in the first place. And so it's easier for me to stop now and remember who I am and who God is, that God's within me, and that I don't have to be upset about anything in this world. And as I've told many people, it's only planet Earth software. It's not anything serious. It's not reality. The Course in Miracles says the only thing that is real is God, and everything else is not. What a joyful, peaceful message that is to all of us. You do not have to be upset about anything. When you come to a fork in the road, you stop. Say, "Okay, God, I'm going to stand here till you tell me which way." And it's amazing. And of course, we're not talking about God on a cloud up there somewhere. We're talking about that presence and power that's already within us, that already knows. And if we will just stop, what is already known will come forth. Jesus said, "I came that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full." Well, if your joy is full, then there's no room for anything else. There's no room for worry, upsetment, and all of that. You live in that joy of God, that presence and power of God. And when you say, do that, it comes forth from you and things change. Can you trust that? Can you trust that that will actually happen? Because I know to some people it sounds like a fairy tale. Oh, what do you mean, that God will do what God wants to do in God's own time, and we don't know what that is, and we don't know whether God will want to do it for us, and maybe we're not supposed to have it, and you get all that garbage. Oh, we put up so many blocks in our own way. And it is simply be still. Quiet your mind. Quiet your body. Quiet your emotions. And just simply know. We don't have to hope. We don't have to worry about whether it's going to happen. It just is. And there's nothing else. There's nothing else. When we try to fix things with emotion and turmoil, it doesn't work. And you know that as well as I do. I know how many brick walls I've run into and tried to fix things and arrange things, and what I thought was going to happen didn't. But when I stopped and said, hey, come forth from me. Years ago I spent some time at HeartMath. I don't know if you've heard of HeartMath. It's in Boulder Creek, California. And they teach that the vibration of your heart is the strongest vibration. And we try to live from our heads, which is the weakest vibration. And so they taught us that when we come up against something, they said freeze frame it, like you do on a film. You stop a film, and so you freeze frame that picture, and then you go down into your heart space in meditation. And when you are calm, you ask the question, what is a better way to do this? Now, I was at that seminar with lawyers, doctors, businessmen. I was the only minister there. And so Howard said, okay, let's make a party. Let's create a party. Okay, what do we need for a party? Okay, we need a place to have the party. We need food. We need a DJ. We need music and all of this stuff that we needed to have a party. And he said, okay, freeze frame that. And he took us in meditation down into the heart space. And then he said, what is a better way to look at this? And then when we came out of the meditation, he said, let's create the party. What do we need? We need friends. We need ambiance. We need conversation. All of those things that are really important come out of the heart. And there wasn't a more astonished bunch of people there than the businessmen and the lawyers and so forth that were expecting something totally different. But what came out of the heart was so different than what came from the head. And he said, you have to entrain your head, the vibrations of your brain with the vibrations of your heart. And you get a totally different way of looking at things. So this morning I'd just like to leave you with whatever you think you are facing in life, stop. Stand still. You can say what I said. Okay, God, I'm going to stand here, be quiet until you fix this. It doesn't matter. You're not insulting God. There's not a God in the cloud to be insulted, for heaven's sake. There is just that part of you that knows the truth, and you just let it express. Just be still and know.